Hello, I have a new position for my microphone.
Hello lovely people, it's Jamie, and today I'm here to talk about two occasions where I have been mistaken for a trans woman. Mistaken is maybe the wrong word. Two occasions where people I've been interacting with have thought I was a trans woman when they found out I'm transgender. So it's happened to me on two separate occasions where people have thought I was a trans woman, and both times that this happened to me, I was already pretty far into my transition, like a couple years, 3 years on testosterone. Everybody already automatically read me as male in every situation, and I guess it just took me aback a bit, which is why I'm making this video. Not that there's anything wrong with being a trans woman or there's anything to be embarrassed about on whatever, but just I'm not a trans woman, and it was kind of strange to be in a situation where people thought I was. First time it happened was a job interview. I feel like job interviews and job situations are just notoriously a little bit awkward to trans people anyway, and I was a little bit anxious about just being like, yes, I am transgender and blah blah blah, and telling them. But it was at a time before I changed my passport, which meant that I kind of had to, because they needed to see my passport in order to know that I was allowed to work. So what I did is I took along my incorrect passport with the most horrendous photo of me when I was 14, long hair, before the braces properly did their magic, and yeah, just not good. And also took along my deed poll with the name Jamie on to show that I had legally changed my name to Jamie. And I had every intention of, when they asked for those documents, to hand them over and be like, my voice just broke, to hand them over and just be like, I'm transgender, the name on my passport is wrong, the gender on my passport is wrong because I've not changed it yet, here's the deed poll to show my legal name, blah blah blah, this should be sufficient, I have googled it. No, I didn't do that, I was too nervous. They said, could we please have your passport? And I handed them the passport and they said, this is also a deed poll because my name is different. What? Why did I do that? And I just let them walk away without saying anything else. And then I sat in the room, like, sweating profusely, going like, you're an idiot, you're an idiot, you're an idiot, why did you do that? And I could hear them mumbling from the other room and sounding very confused and being like, why? What does that say? Why is that? I don't know what's happening. Do we ask? I don't know. And I was just like, oh, Jamie, what have you done? So after several minutes of me just sweating, feeling like I was gonna shit myself, they came back through and they were like, come on, can we have a chat with you for a minute? I was like, yeah, you can. Preferably not, but okay. They basically were really nice about it. They just said, we were wondering why the name on your application was different to the name on the passport you've given us and what this document means. They're holding up my deed poll. So I explained, I said, I'm transgender, I hadn't gotten around to changing my passport yet. I'm really sorry I didn't explain it more clearly. They got very confused and kind of, I was feeling like it was partly my fault, but I felt like that explained things okay. They instantly apologized and they're like, oh, we're really sorry, we didn't mean to ask, like, hope you're okay. And then they were like, so when are you gonna start your transition? And I was just confused. I was like, what? What? But then they kind of asked me other questions about like when I was going to start living as female and whether I already lived as female in certain parts of my life and when I changed my name and everything like that. And then I realised that they had gotten royally confused and kind of mixed up the whole process of changing documents and passports and thought that I was a trans woman who had started my transition but that had changed my passport. So I told them that I was actually a trans man. I'd been transitioning for a few years and living as male for a few years. I'd been on testosterone. Yeah, just hadn't changed my passport yet. I think they were a bit shocked then because they over-complimented. You know, when people over-compliment you, they find out you're trans and they're like, oh, you're so good looking, like, oh, you'd never be able to tell. And they just went, oh, you had us so fooled. And I was like, oh, you're really nice people, but fooled of what? I don't know. Yeah, I think they were really nice. They were fine about it whilst I did get the job, and they were totally fine and nothing was ever said again, and they weren't horrible people. They just didn't know much about it, so they said a few things wrong, and that just happens sometimes. It was fine, I wasn't offended. But yeah, that was the first time it happened. The second time it happened was a kind of more drawn out process where I didn't really find out the full story until a couple of years later. That makes it sound really interesting and dramatic. It's not actually, it's kind of boring. During the third year of my undergraduate degree, I had to do a dissertation research project, and I chose to do it on transgender people. So I had my first meeting with my supervisor for this project, who's now my PhD supervisor, and I talked to him about the project I wanted to do, looking at trans people, looking at well-being, that I was really interested in helping the trans community, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. And he was like really open to the project. Then at the end he was like, I'd like to lend you this book. It's a very important book to me, but I think it will be really useful for you. I'd like to lend it to you. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. I was a little bit confused. And I went home and I read the book, and it was a fucking awful book, like terrible book, I'm sorry. And it's called The Man Who Would Be Queen, and I was reading it thinking, why did he give me this book? This is basically a book about somebody shitting on trans women, which is just not very helpful, and now I'm kind of offended. He didn't realise that it wasn't the best book about trans people. But under no circumstances should you read that book, because there is much wrong with it. Much wrong with it, and it will just make you angry. Anyway, he didn't realise that, and then it was a couple years later, or like a year or so later, I actually found out that he thought I was a pre-transition trans woman, that I hadn't come out yet, and he gave me the book because he thought it might help me. Just help me. It would never have helped under any circumstances, but I appreciate the sentiment of the gesture. But yeah, he thought I was a trans woman, and he actually kind of clicked two and two together later the same day that he lent me the book, and then felt really awkward about the fact he'd lent me the book. And then we can joke about it now, but yeah, it was a bit weird at the time. So yeah, those are the two times that people thought I was a trans woman. Obviously, again, nothing wrong with being a trans woman. This was not a video about like shitting on trans women or saying that it's a bad thing at all. Just, I found it quite amusing that this happened a couple times when I was quite far into my transition. And I think it backs up that whole thing of like the shock when people find out you're trans sometimes, and like, oh, I never would have guessed. And it's kind of like people taking it to another extreme and just assuming you're trans in a different way, because you can't possibly be trans in the way you are because you can't tell. I kind of just find it funny that some people assume that if you're trans, you have to obviously be trans, and if you're not obviously trans, then you must be like pre-transition. Yeah, you know, because I look like a guy, I can't possibly be a trans man. But yeah, that's it for this video. I don't think there was really any point to it. I just thought it was a funny story. Leave below your funny stories of when people have assumed something about you when you've told them you're trans, or just awkward shit that happens when you're trans, because there's a lot of it. And yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Much love. Bye.